"Kneel, son of mine." Dracula did not kneel. Instead, he whispered, "I am not your son." And he plunged a silver-bladed crucifix into his own chest. The castle screamed. Jonathan, watching from the gallery, felt his heart stop. Blood splattered across the floor. Dracula fell to one knee, not in surrender but in sacrifice. As his lifeblood spilled, the codex flared in Jonathan's hands, the runes rearranged. The ritual had begun. The vault shuddered. Sarganash roared, fury and fear combined. Dracula smiled, fangs blood-stained. "You forgot, old one. I was born of death." But the daughter lunged. She moved too fast to follow, impaling Dracula on her claws, lifting him like a marionette. "No more riddles," she hissed. "No more mercy." Jonathan screamed, running down the stairs, the codex in one hand, a stake in the other. The girl turned, eyes burning, blood dripping from her fingers, but she hesitated. For just 1 second, and Dracula whispered, "Now." Jonathan drove the stake through her heart. She let out a piercing scream that shattered every window in the castle. Red light shot skyward, splitting the clouds. From below, Sarganash roared, but the cavern was collapsing, light swallowing his form. The ritual had completed. The daughter burned, her body unraveling into ash and ribbons of crimson wind. Sarganash's body cracked like a cocoon. And for the first time in eons, he screamed in fear. The castle shook like a creature in its death throes. Sarganash screamed as the red light of the blood moon turned white-hot. His great body, forged from ancient sin and blood curse, began to tear. First at the ribs, then the mouth, then the wings, each membrane shredding into ribbons of screaming mist. Jonathan stumbled backward as debris fell around him. Dracula collapsed beside the altar, pale as marble, the crucifix blade still buried in his heart. From the cracking vault below, Sarganash clawed upward one last time. His voice was no longer regal, it was desperate. "I am the first," he bellowed. "I cannot end." But the codex trembled in Jonathan's hands. The blood-soaked page turned on its own, revealing a final line written in ancient red. "He who births the blood must drink of it and end it." Jonathan looked to Dracula. Still breathing, barely. He knelt beside the count. "It's not finished," Jonathan whispered. "You must drink." Dracula's eyes fluttered open, weak, hollow. He looked down at the crucifix in his chest. "If I pull it free, I rise again, stronger than ever." Jonathan nodded. "But this time, not for myself," Dracula murmured. And with trembling hands, he drew the blade from his heart. The moment it left his chest, the castle lit up in a burst of red and white flame. The air howled. Dracula gasped, not in pain but in rebirth. Veins lit up across his arms like molten fire. His eyes shone like twin suns. His breath came ragged. He rose. No longer just vampire. No longer just man. Something else. A balance between horror and salvation. He took the codex from Jonathan, tore the page from it, and held it to his mouth. Then he drank it. Below, Sarganash's roar died in his throat. His body began to wither, Crumbling into dust, scale by scale, bone by bone, he reached upward, clawing the air. And then silence. The vault folded in on itself. The bones of the earth groaned, then stilled. The blood moon above began to fade. The castle didn't collapse. It simply breathed out and stopped moving. The red light faded from the stones. The house of thorns crumbled inward, turning to soot. The faces in the walls went still, and the screaming wind died. Jonathan stood beside Dracula in the ruined crypt. The ashes of the daughter drifted in soft spirals around them, glowing faintly as they fell. "She was innocent once," Dracula whispered. Jonathan nodded. "We all were." The codex snapped shut on its own. Its ink faded, its purpose complete. Outside, dawn broke. For the first time in over a century, sunlight touched the top of Castle Orlock. Not a trickle, not an illusion, real golden morning. And for the first time in centuries, Dracula stood in it. He did not burn, he only blinked. Jonathan stared. How? Dracula looked down at his hands. They no longer trembled. His skin no longer shone with death, but with warmth. "I drank of the page," he said, "the blood of the curse, the first blood." And in doing so, he stepped forward into the light. "I ended my beginning." From far below in the cold crypt, something else stirred, but it did not rise. A shard of Sarganash's soul, sealed in salt and bone, buried itself in the earth like a seed. And the earth began to hum. The village of Vaser Valley awoke to silence. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that follows a scream too long held. The forest was still, the sky clear. The red had drained from the moon. But those who stepped outside that morning noticed something strange. The birds did not sing. The shadows were too still, and every well in town had turned to blood. Jonathan stood in the main hall of Castle Orlock, staring at the sunlight pouring through the cracked ceiling. A place that once devoured hope now breathed like an old man waking from nightmare. Dracula sat in a wooden chair, cloak folded beside him. He looked changed, not in appearance, in presence. He was quieter now, heavier, as though his soul had grown an age older. Jonathan approached cautiously. "You haven't burned." "No," Dracula said, "and I don't thirst." He looked down at his own hands. "Perhaps I am no longer damned, but I am not saved either." Jonathan held up the codex. The curse broke. "No," Dracula said grimly, only paused. Miles beneath their feet, in the deepest belly of the earth, the shard of Sarganash's soul pulsed once more. It had no name now, no form, but it remembered its pain, its death, its hatred, and in the darkness it whispered to something older, to something buried in blood-soaked stone. That night, a grave in the village cemetery split open, not from beneath, but from above. A child's coffin empty, the name etched, Elisa Barlia, 1872, 1879. But she had died in 1878. The date had changed. The dirt whispered with breath. The dead were listening. Back in the castle, Jonathan began sorting the remnants of the codex. Many pages had crumbled into ash after the ritual, but some remained. One page glowed faintly in moonlight. The ink had returned, not in Latin, but in Romanian. Jonathan read aloud, "The blood that breaks also births. The moon sleeps, but the shadow waits." He looked to Dracula. "We didn't kill him," Dracula nodded. "No, we delayed him." Jonathan swallowed hard. "And now?" "Now," Dracula said, "we prepare." 3 days passed. The sun continued to rise, but every night the moon came back a little darker, less silver, more rust. And people began to dream. Dreams of black wings, of a cradle made from thorns, of a child with no eyes, whispering through walls. Jonathan was studying the castle crypt when he found a hidden passage behind the altar, a door disguised as a stone relief, a knight slaying a dragon. He pressed a palm to it. The stone shifted. A spiral stairwell descended into shadow. Jonathan lit a torch. He descended. The air thickened as he moved down. Strange symbols covered the walls, predating even the codex's style. Bones, painted in white ash, lined the steps. At the bottom, a circular chamber domed and humming softly. At its center sat a bassinet, carved from bone, lined in ash. It rocked gently, empty. Jonathan stepped closer. Inside was a single tooth, human, baby-sized, still bloody. From the wall, a voice whispered, "You delayed the father, but you birthed the son." Dracula entered the chamber just as Jonathan stumbled back. They both stared at the bassinet. "You said your daughter was sealed," Jonathan murmured. "You never said anything about—" "I didn't know," Dracula said. But even he didn't sound convinced. Jonathan turned to him. "Is it possible that when she died, when you drank the blood of the curse, I became a gate?" Dracula finished. That night, the wind howled. The trees bent, not with wind, but with pressure. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, a child cried not with pain, but with hunger, a sound older than any scream. And the blood moon began to rise again.